So, it was interesting in our council meeting last night. A couple of things I want to talk about. We had a special meeting that I don't think we've really reported on, where we talked about the community land trust,
Right.
and we talked about the employee increases and what was hoped to be a scale, and that got deferred. And so, just a little commentary on that. What was interesting to me is the land trust was just put off. And I think that part of that is just a lack of understanding what exactly the product is and what the value of the $1 million contribution would be, and really what's being brought to the table. But that's just my impression. I mean, so you can speak to it as an active member of council and, a voting member. So kind of where are you on the land trust?
Well, on the land trust, I will say it's complicated.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot to it, and we've had meetings, and they've been going on for a while with Dr. Johnson and with the UNC Chapel Hill, and I think there's something to the land trust, and I think we certainly need to do something with housing. There's no doubt. The thing that I can't grasp, and I have a hard time grasping, is the cost of land in Rocky Mount. I can understand in a large city such as a Charlotte or Atlanta or Washington D.C. Or even Raleigh, where an acre of land or a piece of land to build a home is expensive.
Sure.
And it's a big portion of the mortgage, so to speak. So I'm having trouble because a lot in Rocky Mount, North Carolina is not as much in those larger cities. So that's what I struggle with. I do see that we need to do something. There's no doubt we need to do something with housing. I think that we do need to take large tracts of land
right.
that we have right now, because we have whole neighborhoods that if we could just go through and transform a block at a time, it would transform that neighborhood and ultimately have a positive impact on the city. I'm not close to the idea of the land trust.
Right.
I think what I need is a little more understanding, because I just can't grasp it right now. And I think and we as a city probably need to do a better job with the general public in educating the general public, in addition to city council members such as myself.
Well, and my sense is that you're not alone in that in terms of the council and how people feel about the community land trust. And, I campaigned on concepts similar to that, but primarily it was a response to this whole notion of gentrification,
Right.
gentrification. And to your point right now, real estate prices, the underlying real estate on top and below the house, is not of significant enough value to really displace people.
Right.
But if we're going to fight over gentrification, then I kind of see the land trust as a solution to that, and at least an alternative to that. And it's just a different product. Now, whether or not it deserves $1 million, whether or not it deserves the management fee and the setup fees associated with that, that's something that probably does require some waiting and some discussion. Offhand, I think $1 million really doesn't get you very far in terms of the number of houses that it can require, and or raw land for that matter. So I think that if we go down that road, we need to really have some conversation about that. Is it enough? I mean, are we really making a commitment, or are we just putting in the bare minimum to get it started, and really what have we obtained? So there are still some outstanding questions, but I see it as just another product and an answer to gentrification that I have no idea when that would occur in our current growth model, if you will. So, but anyway, it's interesting to hear that. And I don't know if you have any other thoughts or where it might feel appropriate to you based on your understanding for a community land trust for the city.
Well, I think we need to get our hands around the fees, which
Right.
you mentioned. The $1 million, I think that was more going with some of the COVID funds and what we can do regarding the child care. And that's another concern. The $1 million is great.
Right.
But what that's going to do is going to subsidize approximately 65 staffing for supplemental to get to the living wage, so to speak. But what are we going to do in years 2, 3, and 4, and after that, because that funds it for 1 year? Now, one thing I do agree with is the city of Rocky Mount, the city council, we do not need to be in the business of owning land.
Right.
So I like the concept of the land trust, where it's once the city council or once the citizens of Rocky Mount fund it, then it has its own separate board. Now, there is some input from the city council and the mayor.
Right.
And so I do like that idea, but coming from free enterprise, I also like the idea. We have a lot of land out there, as you well know, a lot of properties that we need to foreclose on.
Yes.
So so why not let the free market? So that's where I struggle.
Right.
And Jenny Bonds, she contacted me and is happy to sit down with me and explain it more. And then I think we're going to have some meetings coming up to explain it. So I think it's just an unknown. I do recognize that there's probably a timeline, especially with a lot of money coming out of DC right now. So I do understand that we have a little bit of a time crunch going on.
It will expire. So just for folks who don't know, or as intimately as we do, the current proposal is that the City of Rocky Mount fund a community land trust to the tune of $1 million from local funds, in other words, from the City of Rocky Mount's funds. And on top of that, we'll fund a management fee to set this up, which will include the attorneys and the lawyers and the accountants and consultants who will help in that process. And it looks like that's about 25%. So it's another $250,000, of which, in addition to which, it looks like another $1 million that the consultants can bring to the table for a total of $2 million to fund the project. But the first $1 million really is for the acquisition of land and for houses. Right. The second $1 million, as you spoke to, really is a funding source to help with child daycare, because that's one of the leading causes of individuals not being able to seek employment right now, particularly if you're a single woman. And your point is well taken, that that's a one and done. So we get it for a year, and if we can't find some way to sustain that, then it just sunsets. And so, are you better off to start that? Do you have some sort of funding store for sustainability going forward? Those are all questions that I think need to be answered, and I think are part of the confusion that we saw with just the removal and tabling of that on the schedule. Now, I'm not really sure when we're going to put it back on the agenda, but it will be interesting to see, as we go forward, what that looks like. The other big issue that we talked about the other week was the pay scale from Gallagher, who had put that together for us, pay scales. And you had done a lot of research on that. Now, I will say right now, fundamentally, I think this is a tool that the city needs. I think it is something that creates equity amongst, we'll call it, classifications within the employee group, so that everybody's treated more fairly than they would otherwise. And so really what I mean for that is it's very similar to the military, where if you're an enlisted man or woman, you have grades from E1 to E12. And then if you're an officer, you have grades from O1 to O12. And so you get paid more because you have more responsibility at each rank. So that's easier for a lot of people to understand. But you did a lot of research, and you had some real serious concerns, at least on the quick adoption of the plan. And so why don't you share that a little bit? And I think you weren't alone in that. I think maybe Councilman Walker also shared those concerns, as well as others that I've heard from.
And you're exactly correct. I mean, we certainly need to do a pay study. We've got a staff that is dedicated to the citizens of Rocky Mount and very valued, and we appreciate, I think, from you to the entire city council, we see the value there, and we do need to do something. We've got to be competitive. We've got to make sure people get paid a fair wage. And so the study is needed. The issue I have is the previous city council approved the study. And then, so we were elected in 2019, and we did not have it in 2019, didn't have it in 2020, now 2021, we finally have it. And then we're supposed to pass it within 3 to 4 weeks. We all received presentations, and I know there was a lot of work in there. But the concern is we do have a current pay scale. And so you take someone that's not considered, they're considered a supervisor, but they get paid overtime, which is called non-exempt. And so in many cases, a lot of those folks make some pretty good money in overtime, and then all of a sudden they reclassified as exempt, which means they don't make any overtime. And so, granted, no one should depend on overtime. But the reality is, year after year after year after year, you get that overtime, you start to depend on it. So
we all spend what we make. Let's be honest.
Spend what you make. But the concern is, so that person who's no longer receiving that wage then is going to be a little concerned and maybe start looking. And we have over 150 or 159 openings in the city of Rocky Mount of about 900.
Okay.
And so we need to pay attention to that. And we need, and we need to look strongly at areas such as police and fire. Our firefighters, they respond, their first response EMT calls. And I want to say it's something around 15,000 calls a year that those individuals make it. And I think it's great. But you take a firefighter in Rocky Mount compared to a firefighter maybe in another city, they're actually getting paid, is my understanding, less money, but have more work to do because these other cities don't have the same concept that we do is responding to these EMT calls. So there's a lot of areas that we need to look at like that. And then you need to look at, our sanitation workers. You need to look at our utilities. How vital are our utilities? I mean, we can't, this business,
right?
This people, I mean, you just can't operate without the utilities. So I think we just said, let's pause it. Let's give a COLA. And we agreed upon a 4.5% COLA.
Right.
And have the manager and staff come back to us at our March 14th meeting, I believe, which is Committee of the Whole.
Right.
And let's seriously look into it. And I think there were a lot of concerns from staff as well. Now, we as council and mayor, we've got to be careful with that because the manager is the one that manages the staff. We only are responsible for the manager, the city attorney and city clerk. And
too much interaction. How do you put that genie back in the bottle in terms of a chain of command? Right. So that does become a slippery slope. But however, I think folks are hearing that maybe the rollout or implementation was not as, I hate to say not as good. Let's just say the rollout perhaps could have been better in terms of folks walking away with greater understanding.
Right.
So now everybody owns some responsibility in that. I'm not going to pretend to decide if it's the hearer or the preacher in the story. But so it's really a combination of all those things. So, and I was hearing the same concerns. It really is not bad. Let's consider really rolling it out, but let's make sure that we've got it right before we implement it.
Right.
And I applaud you and others working through the compromise to come up with the cost of living adjustment. I thought that was very reasonable, very fair. And in addition, allocated funds for performance bonuses as appropriate and necessary. Right. And hopefully they'll find itself to the right folks. Now, I would be an advocate that we bring that forward before March, that it becomes an almost living document that we start working with on a consistent basis to the extent that the council has time. Right. Because I'm afraid, as many things, if you set a deadline too far out, you don't really start looking at it until February, maybe.
Yeah. Well, my concern, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I was trying to give a little latitude to the manager and the HR department because I'm not sure how long it's going to take to get in touch with Gallagher and get the wheels moving like that. So certainly the manager can present in January.
Sure.
That's perfectly fine. So,
and I would encourage her to do that, have the conversation sooner than later, because it's not just one item. There are lots of little pieces. So it feels like if I can hammer out one little piece at a time, it'd be far more efficient and it'd be a much greater understanding.
Right. So, but I think we emphasized at that meeting that we value our staff because the city council, and I think I speak,
you speak for everybody. Yes, you do.
And I think I can speak for you that we value our staff, and without the staff, we couldn't do anything. And the citizens depend on the services we receive from our staff, and we have a good staff.
Well, I think you can absolutely make that statement on my behalf as many times as you want to. I think that's just fantastic. Let me tell you something, just a little aside. I just had an opportunity to talk with Jenny Moorbutter, and she was telling me that the city of Rocky Mount, the employees of the city of Rocky Mount, without any kind of matching funds, have contributed 10% of the area's fundraise at the United Way.
Wow.
So on top of having these needs that we need to help our folks, I just want to point out how generous they have been historically. That's a big deal.
Right.
And those monies that have been allocated for these increases will stay here locally. They will be spent here locally. And I mean, I'm not calling this a stimulus package, but it's better than a lot of funds that perhaps we might spend in terms of its impact locally. So it's cycling and recycling and all that's a good thing.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting perspective, and I think it explains to a lot of folks. So I've been getting a lot of calls, and I'm sure you have. Well, why didn't you do it? What's going on? I don't understand what y'all did, how it was different. But I think you did a great job of explaining that, and I think that's something that I think people need to understand.
Right.
It's not dead. It was just simply, let's get you something
Right.
until we can get it right.
Right.
Versus let's do something quickly that may not be exactly what we're trying to achieve.
Right. And we recognize the inflation that's going on right now.
That's right.
I think this morning I heard on the news that a year ago, Thanksgiving a year ago, gasoline per gallon's increased $1.25.
Right.
And that's real.
Right.
I mean,
so 2 points I just want to point out to folks is that, in that council meeting and the conversation, staff indicated that it would be budget neutral from a cash flow position this year.
correct.
So the reason that it's budget neutral is that we fund 100% of our positions in the budget. So if we say that we've got 900 employees and 156 vacancies, well, we pretend in the budget that we're fully staffed at every moment in time. So those vacancies create call it a balance, a balance in the budget that these monies would simply be absorbed by. And so there would be no impact on our budget that we presented. Now, that's not true going forward necessarily, and it's certainly not true if we fill those positions. So I just think it's important for folks to really understand what that means. It's a little bit of a nuance, but it's kind of a big deal in my estimation.
Right.
So, and in looking at it too, I haven't really seen the turnover rates. My guess is we're probably no better or worse than anybody else. But your point is, in this environment, we got to be more competitive. And so let's take our time and try to make that happen. And I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, because we're competing, we say like a 50-mile radius.
Right.
And we're also competing against other utilities. I mean,
Sure.
City of Rocky Mount's a full service city.
Right.
And so we're competing, for our folks to work on the electric lines and so forth that could go elsewhere.
Well, the Duke Energies, not to mention other municipalities.
Right.
I mean, it's a big world out there.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so that's what we did, and we are going to revisit that, and
Right.
and I look forward to seeing what is in store for us.
So let's talk a little bit about last night's council meeting. It was pretty straightforward. We had an agenda. I think we were in essence done, 45 minutes before we went into closed sessions on a couple of items, but which really that didn't take very long either. So really not a whole lot to talk about other than we got there, and that was maybe the smoothest meeting we've had in a while. So anyway, there's nothing to comment, but one of the things that you're doing in Ward 5 is you're trying to add a park, or at least it's been funded, or at least a study has been funded. So talk to me a little bit about that. I went out and had a chance to participate. I thought it was great.
Right.
And I thought you had a pretty good participation, but let's walk us through that.
Well, since I was elected, that's been one of my concerns is in Ward 5, there is only one park. In Ward 5, with the way it is currently and the way it was, it crosses 95 and goes over into Bun Farm. And so we have one park over there, and that was when they were annexed in, that developer had built a park. So that's the only park that we have. And so there's really no accessibility for families or kids to have recreation. And we've got a wonderful park system in Rocky Mount, but on the side of town that I represent, we don't. We have some parks nearby. So I've really tried to press and get a park. And so we had a city manager instructed Parks and Rec, so Joel Dunn. He created a kind of a greet and meet type thing. And what it was is we had it at a hotel, and and we invited the citizens to come by. And we had over 60 citizens come by to participate. And we had boards set up of, what would you like to see?
Right.
And overwhelmingly.
Well, walk us through some of those. I mean, what I saw was like a kayaking trail, a walking trail through the woods, golf,
spray park, the disc golf, and bike trails.
I just think that's important because we weren't just talking about a traditional park where we might have a merry-go-round and a swing set. It was we were envisioning everything was open. What do you want and what would be most utilized? Because that's important. And it's important to note, too, that every park in the city of Rocky Mount is eligible for everybody in the community to participate and enjoy. So while it's for Ward 5, it really is for the community as a whole. but it may be more convenient for those living
Right.
in your ward to
Right.
use it versus other people.
Right. So, and then the following day, we had something at the Black Box Theater at the old Brownsville
Sure.
library, and so that was for folks that are in the so-called industry, and we had folks from the hospital, from Nashville, from the YMCA, had a lot of folks show up. So it was exciting to see what was going on, but overwhelmingly at the meeting, people placed their stars on, people are interested in walking trails or riding trails, and for like a bike. And so I think that's kind of where things might be heading. But what was so neat is to learn, just think if we could connect all the way the western part of Ward 5 all the way over to Sunset Park, then which would go over to Battle Park, which then will ultimately go over to Martin Luther King Park. And
Sure.
that would be so cool, because it would be a connector for almost the entire community.
Well, it's a Greenway.
The Greenway. And another great thing, just think if Nashville decided to do something, so then we could connect into Nashville and then possibly Nash County. I know a couple of weeks ago, the commissioners approved, I haven't read it, but they approved, basically they support a Greenway going up to Five County Stadium, which is in Wake County, which ultimately goes to Raleigh. But just imagine,
Right.
if you could go from Martin Luther King Park in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, ride all the way up through Nashville, North Carolina, and get into Nash County, and then ultimately enter into Wake County, going all the way to Raleigh. I'm not going to ride it, but I'm sure there's someone there. But just think, economic development for that, exercise, and then think if Edgecombe County decided to go through Edgecombe County up to Tarboro. Just imagine that would be awesome.
Well, you're connecting communities in a very healthy way. You're
Right.
creating a nice trail that I think becomes something that's very important for our community as a
Right.
whole. And it wouldn't be so hard. I mean, Stony Creek connects to Tar River, which connects to, Martin Luther King. So I can see how you're getting the vision on this, and that would be really cool to see
Right.
happen. And I know that we've got some improvements coming at Battle Park.
Oh, man.
We've got some grants on that, and so that'll bolster this whole concept and process. So I live not far from the City Lake, and it is really easy for me to walk on the City Lake, cross over Sunset Park, pick up the Greenway, and to go to Stith Park and to go to Martin Luther King Jr. Park. And it's a wonderful, easy walk. And I really do think
Right.
it would be awesome to be able to connect and take that even to the downtown through I think what's proposed, an old rail bed. So they call it the Monk Trail, I think.
Right.
But anyway, neither here nor there. So I'm excited for you. So where are we in the phase? Have you tallied it up? Do you have an idea of what folks are saying that they really like?
Well, again, it's more of the trail thing, but the big thing obviously is money.
Right.
So, and land acquisition. And so everything takes money. So we've got to find money, allocate money. Hopefully we could be open for some grants, because, when we did the Battle Park, and I was able to sit in on the presentation for the North Carolina Parks and Rec. I'm
Sure.
not sure what the name, but Battle Park scored, out of all the parks in North Carolina, scored the highest.
Really?
And we came number one out of the state, and were funded. And that's the large part of the funding that we received. And then we were able, I understand, to parlay some of that money to now where we have a more of a 5K type running trail, biking trail. And then I think Coach Gainey from, the high
Rocky
school,
Mount High School, yeah.
Rocky Mount High School, is going to be able to use that for track meets and so
Oh,
forth.
outstanding.
So,
That would be great. Really?
And other high schools as well. So it's awesome.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So any other things, activities that are going on in your ward or the city that you got concerns about? I think we've kind of covered the terrain in terms of the last couple of meetings, and no pun intended, but
Right.
kind of was.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no secret that I'm all for the transparency. I think that every citizen needs to be aware of what we do on their behalf.
Right.
So I think everything needs to be out in the open, and people need to be informed, so they can call you, they can call me and the others and say, hey, yay, I like this. What about a tweak on this? Or no, we shouldn't do this as a city, because the more people who participate in how government runs, we're going to be a better government. We're going to be a better city. So I'm really pushing for that transparency. We've done a better job, but there's a lot of room for improvement.
Sure. Well, it's a constant improvement, right? And there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong
Right.
with making a mistake. You just got to make sure you recognize it, fix it, communicate it.
Right. And then the infrastructure, I do have concerns with infrastructure. We had a study that was going on prior to 2019 when we took office. And I think we need to continue that study, because I think what we're going to find is we have things that we need to take care of in Rocky Mount. But it's no different than any other
Right.
city in the United
Right.
States.
Right.
You know, the funding that's coming down with the latest package out of DC is going to, how much money is Rocky Mount going to get for our infrastructure? What can we use? We don't know yet. I'm excited to learn the possibilities, and hopefully that, you know, we can take care of some things that we need to, such as water and the sewer and the water plants and sewer plants, because that's stuff that we don't see, but we use it every single day.
Right.
And that's economic development.
Absolutely. Those dollars stay here. They improve our communities. It gives us the bandwidth to really
Right.
be able to offer in terms of new industrial parks and areas that we're trying to develop. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But it starts with the assessment. We don't even know what we're shooting for, or how
Right.
much money it will really even take.
Right. And, you know, talking about economic development, you know, we both serve on the Carolinas Gateway Partnership Board, and Norris and Oppie have done a great job going after the food industries. And what do they need? They need the water, and they need the wastewater. And we can attract those, and we are attracting them because we have it.
Right.
We can sell a lot of water.
Right.
So, and you look at Pfizer and Honeywell and the rest of them, they depend on our water. So that's why I press so hard on the infrastructure.
Sure. Well, Councilman, I want to thank you for coming. I really have enjoyed talking with you, and I always enjoy being with you. And your insights, of course, are invaluable. And thank you for your service to the city.
Okay. Well, likewise, Mayor, and I appreciate all that you do. You actually do a lot behind the scenes that many people don't see, and I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.